Hello everyone, let's start our lesson. Our lesson today is about sentences and the different kinds of sentences. There are main three kinds of sentences like simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Why should we know the differences between these three main types of sentences? It's possible to write with sentence variety. Sentence variety helps make your writing more interesting. So it's preferable to write your essay, for example, using simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. It's better to write with these three different types, not only one type. Okay, let's move on. Let's start with simple sentences. A simple sentence contains a subject and a predicate, or a subject and a verb, and it expresses a single complete thought, one thought only. And also, a simple sentence is a single independent clause. What's meant by independent clause? Independent clause means it can stand by itself, has a complete thought, a complete meaning, and it can stand alone by itself. Let's take some examples. The first example: the cat crept through the dark house. Where is the subject and where is the verb? The subject here is the cat, but the verb is crept, or the subject is the cat and the predicate is crept through the dark house. So it has only one subject, only one verb, so it's a simple sentence. Let's move to the second one. The wary the wary mouse watched from underneath an upturned cereal box. What is the subject in this sentence? Yes, the wary mouse. And what is the verb in this sentence? After the subject, you can find the verb, watched. So it has only one subject and one verb. So it's an independent clause, only one clause, one independent clause. So it's a simple sentence. Let's move to the compound sentence. What's meant by compound sentence? A compound sentence contains two independent clauses. Two independent clauses, and as we said, that independent clause means it can stand by itself. How can we join these two clauses to form a compound sentence? We can join them using some conjunctions like for, and, nor, but, or, and yet. So also. So there are 7 conjunctions. We can call them fanboys. F for, A for and, N that's for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S for so. These are called fanboys. If you find two independent clauses and we join them with one of the fanboys, so it's a compound sentence, not a simple one. The conjunction used can impact the meaning of the sentence. Let's see some examples. The first one: the cat was unsuccessful in his attempt to catch the mouse, and the mouse was equally as unlucky in his attempt to get the cheese. So here we have two independent clause. Two independent clauses, one of them before and the other after the word or after the conjunction and. And we join these two sentences using the conjunction and. So it's a compound sentence. The first independent clause, the cat was unsuccessful. So here the cat is the subject and was is the verb. The second independent clause, the mouse was equally as unlucky in his attempt. So the mouse is the subject and was also is the verb. So here we have two independent clauses. So it's a compound sentences. The second example, the dog had watched all of this, but he had refused to become involved. Here we also have two independent clauses. The first one, the dog had watched all of this. The second clause, he had refused to become involved. Let's use this pointer. So we use but as a conjunction, one of the fanboys, and we join these two sentences. The first one, the dog had watched all of this, and the second one, he had refused to become involved. This is an independent clause, and this is another independent clause. Why it's an independent clause? It can stand by itself. I can stop here. The dog had watched all of this. I can stop here. It has a complete thought and a complete meaning. The dog is the subject. Had watched is the verb. He is another subject. Had refused is another verb. Okay. Let's move to let's move to another type or another kind of sentences. The complex sentence. The complex sentence is an independent clause joined by one or more dependent clauses. We know that independent clause means it can stand by itself. But what's meant by dependent clause? Yes, it means it can't stand by itself. It needs another clause because it can't stand by itself. Why? It doesn't have a complete thought or a complete meaning. A subordinating conjunction begins the dependent clause. So this dependent clause started with one of the subordinating conjunction, not one of the fanboys. No, other conjunctions, we will know them later in the next slide. A dependent clause that begins a sentence must be followed by comma. It's very important. A dependent clause also has a subject and a verb, but it doesn't make sense on its own, so it can't stand by itself because it doesn't has a complete thought or a complete meaning. These are some of the subordinating conjunctions which we can use at the beginning of the dependent clauses, like after, how, until, although, if, unless, as, in, as much as, if, in order that, when, as long as, and so on. And here are some examples of complex sentences. The first one, after he gave it some thought, The mouse decided to wait until later for this trick. It's a complex sentence. Why? Some of us can say that it's a compound one because it has two clauses. This sentence has two clauses, but it's a complex sentence, not a compound one, because these two clauses aren't independent clauses. One of them is dependent and the other is independent. What is the independent one? The second one. The mouse decided to wait until later for his trick. What is the dependent clause? The first one. Why? Because it starts with one of the subordinating conjunctions like after, while, as soon as, when, and so on. The second example. The cat fell asleep on the warm kitchen because he was deprived of sleep the night before. Here we have two clauses. One of them is dependent and the other is independent. So we call this sentence, we call it complex sentence, not compound one, a complex sentence. Why? Because one of the clauses is dependent. Which one? The one that starts with the subordinating conjunction. What is the subordinating conjunction here? It's the word because. Because is a subordinating conjunction, so it's a complex sentence. So the main three types of sentences, a, a simple one, a compound one, and a complex one. But there is another type of sentences. It's called compound complex sentence that we will teach tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you and goodbye.